Here just kind of picking up on some of the things Kirk was saying, Mr. Sorensen, you've obviously spent your entire life engaging Americans on international issues.
Well, I wouldn't say my entire life.
A good part of it.
As I say in my book, I didn't appear in a political platform until I was 4.
Kirk was sort of outlining some of the objectives of the World Affairs Council, and I thought maybe a good place to start would be, after 9/11, a lot of people said Americans are going to re-engage with the world. Over the past, say, decade, have you seen any signs that Americans are reconnecting with the world and engaging on a level that you might have seen before then?
I think the United States government is reconnecting with the world. For 8 years, we had a government that had almost no interest in the world, no interest in world organizations, no interest in international law, very little interest in most of our traditional alliances, and very little interest in helping the destitute, the poor, the sick, the miserable, the illiterate around the world. And now we have an administration and a president who understands the importance of America being a part of and being a leading and contributing part of the international community. And I hope that a great many Americans, taking their cue from the president, will join that new movement.
I could ask you to sit
Yeah,
in
I was
that
gonna say,
chair
is it-
right here.
okay.
If you just pull that chair over next to Kirk.
And what about the role of organizations like the World Affairs Councils of America and the Foreign Policy Association? Maybe you could speak to each of those as individual organizations and together as sort of a group of concerned NGOs and nonprofits that are trying to do just that.
There are a surprisingly number of NGOs, nonprofits, local and even national and international organizations which are trying to do just that. World Affairs Councils may be the best known and the best organized. The Foreign Policy Association, based here in New York City, is certainly the source of a great deal of information, literature, as well as meetings, to provide information and lists of issues and goals for these organizations. But I couldn't begin to list all the others: United Nations associations, returned Peace Corps, volunteers, a variety of new organizations that have sprung up just in the last few years, partly because it's a new atmosphere with Obama in the White House, partly because there's a new urgency as a result of the so-called war on terror involving us and the rest of the world, whether we like it or not. I won't try to name all these organizations because I'd be certain to omit some with my aging memory, but I happen to be on the boards or advisory boards of a great many of them. And they all do good work. They are all trying to get America more engaged in the world. They are trying to prevent the kind of unilateralism that characterized American foreign policy during the previous administration, as well as other times in our history in the past. We like to think that once America became involved in World War I, thereafter we have always recognized the importance of our engagement with the rest of the world. But not so. On economic issues, particularly now that our globe is smaller and we have true globalism in the economics of trade, investment, employment, some people are being hurt. Some people say we should shut others out. And there's a streak of unilateralism, me first, America first, isolationism that goes against the trend that I was just discussing. So organizations which, by encouraging the study of other countries, their governments, their cultures, their history, by encouraging study and travel, not simply tourism to have fun, but to learn more about other countries. Organizations which invite speakers who are experts on foreign policy and other parts of the world, including speakers from abroad, can do a lot to increase or enhance America's readiness for its proper role in this new world of globalism.
You've mentioned the National Peace Corps Association, Returned Peace Corps volunteers. You've mentioned sister cities, where your own family's been involved with both that and the World Affairs Councils across the country. The National Council on International Visitors is a State Department program that has thousands of exchanges between local communities here and overseas. German Marshall Fund and also the World Learning are very big on exchanges. Do you think that there's a time now for these various nonprofits that share a similar mission to come together more in terms of preparing America for a future that requires much more of an exchange and an interaction internationally? Do you sense there's a time now for alliances amongst NGOs, or do you think that they will continue to work separately and that will work as well?
As a board member from time to time of some of these organizations, I know how difficult it is to bring them together, and no one wants chaos. No one wants dilution as a result of overwhelming the soup with too many ingredients. So I am not going to offer some master plan, because I don't think a master plan would work, even if I knew enough to try to put it together. But some alliances are taking place. Even as we speak, the United Nations Association is exploring the possibility of teaming with the United Nations Foundation, with which my wife is associated. The Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt Institute has been talking with the Century Foundation about some kind of alliance or parallel efforts. I have no doubt that many such explorations are going on, and that's a good thing. Many people form their own local group, and they have titles of president and chairman, and they don't want to share that with some other organization. But that's not a good example for world peace, so I would hope that a little more sharing, cooperation, integration could take place.
Thank you. I'm sure you're familiar with the Great Decisions Program that the Foreign Policy Association produces, and it's about 55 years old now. It's used by World Affairs Councils across the country. Did you have experience, when did you first encounter Great Decisions, and what was your experience with the program?
Am I going to ruin this show if I don't have a good answer?
No, that's okay.
I've been a speaker at FPA occasions over a long period of time. I know that the Great Decisions agenda, which FPA produces, often is involved in the selection of the topic assigned to me, or which led to my being invited. But frankly, I can't remember when I first encountered it.
That's fine. Yeah, it's our national discussion program. So essentially, those same topics are used as the basis of discussions, grassroots discussions across the country from
Good.
World Affairs Councils and whatnot. So I thought you might have encountered it maybe in the 60s or 70s.
In the 60s, I had quite a few other
I'm
things
sure
to
you
do.
did.
I had my own great decisions.
Absolutely.
Could you tell us a bit about, give us a bit of historical perspective about the World Affairs Councils? Certainly when you were right in the belly of the beast of the government in the early 60s, you were preoccupied at the time, but can you give us a little sense of what you know about the historical development of these autonomous World Affairs Councils in this country and where you see this going in a quickly changing world?
I believe the first World Affairs Council I ever heard of was in Northern California, and John F. Kennedy spoke there during the course of his, shall we say, testing the waters before he actually became a candidate in 1960. That was a great organization and a great opportunity for him to talk about his foreign policy as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee who hoped to run for national office.
And you've seen, have you had a sense of this, again, nonpartisan?
By the way, there's some talk about my speaking to the World Affairs Council in this Bay Area in May, where I'm going to receive an honorary degree. Also some talk about my speaking to the Commonwealth Club, and I'm told that if you agree to speak to the other, the one won't invite you. That is the worst kind of cooperation I've ever heard. So I suggest that physician, heal thyself.
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know where, I have not heard that, but certainly that's wonderful. We've talked with the current president and you've seeing the dangers in the world now. Do you have a sense of the mission? Let's just talk about the original mission after World War I, and again reinvigorated after World War II. Do you think the mission of the councils, FPA, and our network is as important now as ever? Or is its time, or maybe its purpose has largely been served? I mean,
No. I think there is no doubt that the mission of World Affairs Councils and all of the branches of the Foreign Policy Association and all the similar organizations, that mission is more needed now than ever. The world is getting smaller because of economics, because of new communication, new forms of transportation. More Americans travel than ever before. Even more members of Congress have passports now, which for a long time they did not. We need to know about the rest of the world, and we certainly need to have the rest of the world know more about us. Not simply our military face, not simply our big business face. They need to know more about America's values, America's interests, America's culture and history, what kind of people we are. When I go abroad, I often find it necessary to say, American people don't believe in torture. American people don't believe in indefinite detention. The American people don't believe in bombing innocent people, particularly children in little villages. And the American people don't hate other countries, cultures, and religion. We still need to understand, and I think this would be worth your organization spreading the word. Islam is not inherently evil. And for the United States to fear, mistrust, and hate all adherents of the Islamic faith is the greatest mistake we can make, isolating us from the Muslim community, and even from our own Muslim Americans in this country. So that's one example of where organizations such as the World Affairs Council and FPA, which have an international perspective, which have a foreign policy emphasis are more needed than ever.
And could you briefly comment,
Wow.
even?
That was it.
That was
Hit a home
fantastic.
run there.
Yeah. Could you briefly comment, you mentioned now the benefits of an informed citizenry, but the dangers, the flip side of that, the dangers of an ill-informed citizenry on global affairs in the U.S.
Say that again?
An ill-informed citizenry on global affairs. And take your time, but if you could respond directly to camera, we can cut it in,
I'm gonna respond to the camera.
if possible. Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand the
The
difference
question is
between
he-
what you're asking and what I've already said.
If you feel like you've covered it, that's fine. I was just saying the dangers of the American public not being well informed on
Well, all right,
foreign
yes.
affairs.
Oh, yes, fine. If there are not enough organizations like World Affairs Councils and Foreign Policy Association, if there is an inadequate job of educating and informing the American people about the real world, our obligations, our responsibilities, our opportunities in that world, then sad to say, in a democracy, we leave ourselves vulnerable to those who are going to paint the bleakest and blackest picture. We leave ourselves open to being influenced by demagogues who distort the reality of that world, who practice the politics of fear and hatred, and that way lies nothing but war and killing for this country, which I think we've got to stop.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
And it would just be like a 1 minute with a few other
Just a short greeting. is what we're
luminaries.
asking
Just a
for,
short
right?
greeting,
Yeah,
welcoming
okay.
the high school students to the World Quest, and that is a good thing. Would you be able to do that?
President John F. Kennedy, for whom I worked, once quoted the Chancellor of Germany in the 19th century as saying that 1/3 the students of Germany broke down from overwork, 1/3 broke down from dissipation, but the other third were the future rulers of Germany. I predict that more than 1/3 of the students participating in World Quest are future leaders of this country, because your interest in foreign policy, in world affairs, in what's going on the rest of this planet is absolutely essential to the leadership of this country in the future.
Great, that was
That
perfect.
was
Perfect.
excellent.
And I'll let you guys do the final, whatever you want.
This last one's the easiest of them all. When we do interviews with various folks around the country, in Washington and here in New York, we just ask them, our new slogan is "Prepared to discuss the world." And if you wouldn't mind just saying "Prepared to discuss the world" in camera, we'll cut it together with a number of other distinguished folks such as yourself.
How long?
How long?
I mean, you want me to just say
Literally
those?
just say
Phrase.
"Prepared to
Just
discuss
those-
the world."
You don't want to say about me? Why have me
Yeah,
say
an
it?
introduction,
What do you want? Which video?
like I'm Ted Sorensen.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can say I'm Ted Sorensen, prepared to discuss the world.
Sure.
I'm prepared to discuss.
Or
the
anything
world.
else you want to throw in there
Yeah.
in between.
If you have any good other anecdotes from the Kennedy era,
Of
feel free to
course.
throw those
Sure.
in.
Of course.
I do,
It would be
before,
straight to camera if
do
possible.
this too. I actually, if we have the camera on, and for just something like that, but Ted, if you would be comfortable, just this, I guess just that about the crux of what you went through during the whole Cuban Missile Crisis as.
Tell you what, guys, I've been doing this for a long time. Why don't you just leave it to me?
There you
All
go.
right, beautiful.
There we go.
Are you ready?
Yeah, anytime. There we go.
Until October 1962, as a lawyer working in government, I focused almost entirely on domestic matters and assumed that I would the rest of my life and legal career. But in October 1962, when I was one of the handful of people consulted by President John F. Kennedy on how to avoid the destruction of the entire planet in the nuclear holocaust that seemed to be in our near future, with Russians putting nuclear missiles 90 miles off our shore, I focused on what could be the answer. I helped President Kennedy formulate an answer. I even helped implement the answer in writing his letters to Soviet Chairman Khrushchev, which resulted in that crisis being resolved without the United States firing a shot. I can assure you, ever since then, I've been interested in the rest of the world.
Great.
Excellent.